Bringing this board together, rounding it out, we have Kyung Yoon, who will be our moderator today. She is the CEO of Talent Age Associates and leads its executive search practice area. Previously, for 14 years, she was with Heidrick & Struggles, a leading executive search firm, where she most recently was vice chairman. She, during that time, led its firm's expansion throughout Asia and conducted search projects for many multinational companies, everyone from Dell to Samsung, Merck, Microsoft, and others, as well as in the financial area with Deutsche Bank, H&Q Asia, and many others. She's an experience in executive coaching as well, and so brings a particular perspective for talent development, and its important role across borders. Here at SPRI, we're particularly grateful to her because she serves as an important member of our advisory board. Please welcome this distinguished panel for eWeek. Turn it over to you, Kyung. Thank you.
Thank you, Marguerite. Can you hear me? Okay. Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be here and to participate in Stanford's Entrepreneurship Week. We have decided to have a very open dialogue. So the format is to have I'm going to be leading a question and answer discussion for about an hour with our panelists, and then opening it up to the audience for questions and answers. I think the more interactive it can be, the more pertinent it can be to our real questions, and so we want to give you lots of opportunities to interact with us in the panel. So during the last 14 years of my career, I have been involved in doing many cross-border searches and looking for talent and leaders to lead companies in Asia and here. And I've noticed that entrepreneurial companies are increasingly formed with a global footprint. So it used to be, and not too recent memory, that companies in the US, when they got to a certain size, would quote unquote look to go abroad and expand quote unquote overseas. And now many venture-backed companies are getting formed with a global footprint where the CEO and the CFO might be here in Silicon Valley, close to the venture capitalists, and the head of engineering might be in a place like China or Korea or India, and the vice president of operations might be in a place like Taiwan or Malaysia or Singapore, and the head of sales might be located in the US or Europe or Asia, in any case circumnavigating the globe. So we have a situation where very early on, almost from the inception, the leadership of a venture-backed firm would be taking advantage of all the advantages of the global supply chain, and then people are dispersed all over the place trying to work together. Given that this very complicated context and the fact that usually people need to bond, people being people, they need to get to know each other, and they need to bond, and they need to develop a working relationship and learn how to trust each other, learn each other's strengths and weaknesses and foibles, and kind of figure out how they can work as a team. And then you've got this big disbursement of people across time zones and cultures. It can create some really challenging situations. So I'd like to ask each of our panelists to give us their firsthand experience in building a geographically dispersed management team, and to give us some examples of situations that have worked really well, or maybe situations that have not worked so well. So Eric, would you like to start?
Sure. A good starting point is to talk about interviewing, since we talk about creating teams. Oftentimes the first mistakes are made at the interviewing stage. And my experience is that interviewing is something which is very poorly taught, both on the interviewee side and the interviewer side. Let me speak on the interviewer side for a minute. Oftentimes we focus on the candidate's successes and accomplishments, yet what's most revealing are the failures. And as far as I'm concerned, I get to see what the candidate truly is made of if I ask him or her to describe to me a particularly stressful, really difficult situation and how he or she dealt with that. This is my favorite interviewing technique and has proven to be very revealing. And usually these are the situations where you can tell whether someone is ready to be part of an executive team that can operate at the global level or not. What's particularly challenging about global teams is that you have to be able to create trust and a commitment to shared goals, even though you may have difficulties logistically in creating those shared experiences that lead to the trust and the shared goals. So the first time around is particularly difficult, where you're a CEO of a venture-backed company in Silicon Valley, and you know that you want to have your head of operations somewhere in China, and you go off to interview someone in a country that you're not familiar with. It's much easier the second time and third time around. If you're a serial entrepreneur, you have relationships, and therefore you have a basis of trust and shared experiences. But the first time around, you only have your instincts and your interviewing skills to go with. And usually I try to come ready with scenarios which are particularly stressful scenarios to understand whether the individual is prepared to operate at the right level. Mm-hmm. You have different challenges depending upon which nationality you're talking about. And obviously, you have cultural traits which influence the mean. I've dealt a lot with Israeli-based startups. In fact, as a venture investor, more than half of my portfolio consists of Israeli-based startups. Now, in Israel, most young entrepreneurs, virtually every young entrepreneur, has had one true formative experience. They spent 3 years in the military. And these are people who are accustomed to seeing death in the face, and therefore they're not going to be impressed by very polished executives. They'll tend to be fairly rugged with rough edges, and they'll tend to be extremely argumentative. This does not mean they can't operate in the global level. Right. But they come with a sort of cultural baggage, and this is a generality for the purpose of the panel discussion. But obviously, this has to be mitigated with other skills in the executive team, and a few key relationships have to be tested. For example, if your head of R&D is a rugged Israeli who was a former tank commander, and if you try to pair that person with a polished Web 2.0 marketing person who has only lived in Silicon Valley and drinks 3 cappuccinos a day, that's going to be very difficult to, unless the interviews really confront the people with real life situations. So in general, I try to force these discussions about hypothetical situations, and I make sure that the right people get to talk together who have to work together on a day-to-day basis, and perhaps share an office, certainly share very difficult moments as an entrepreneur. So this has been my experience, that you can diffuse a lot of the problems if you interview in a structured way using realistic situations. The actual combination of traits which are important vary with the position, with the nationality, but I think what's most important is the interviewing and the pairing, and that's what I try to stress in my experience.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. I know that many times after I send in a great candidate, let's say for a CEO search, I will ask the individual that interviewed that person, and I will say, well, what is the detailed feedback? Can you give me the detailed feedback of your assessment? What did you like about them? What did you think were their strengths and weaknesses? And a lot of times the answer I get back was, well, I thought the person was pretty good. And it's very difficult to pry out the details of the interview. So I do agree with you fully that interview skills are really in short supply, both with the person who's interviewing and the interviewee. And a lot of times the interviewee comes out and says, I said, how was the interview? I said, well, I couldn't get a word in edgewise. The person just talked at me the whole time, and I had no real opportunity to engage. So yes, really doing detailed interviewing and getting down into the depths of, what is this person made of, and can they make it work, and can't they make it work, and what happens when they run into trouble is very, very important. Thank you.